Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. Hey, have you checked out my brand new book, Pregnancy Brain, yet? It's all about the mind-body approach to stress management during a high-risk pregnancy specifically. It has stories from my very high-risk pregnancy, tons of client stories, and so much research on the impact of stress on pregnancy and pregnancy complications and how you can have a healthy pregnancy. I would love for you to check it out at pregnancybrainbook.com. That's pregnancybrainbook.com. The idea was first brought to my attention when my son was about 6 weeks old. So it was 6 weeks since his birth, which meant that we were still about 12 weeks away from his due date. He was still in the middle bay of our hotel, our hospital. I guess it kind of felt like a hotel because we lived there for so long. But he was in the middle bay of the 3 bays in our hospital in the NICU. And that bay was for the most critical patients. So the ones who were just recently admitted, they all went to the middle bay. Or babies like my son, who were extremely preterm and were very sick and very fragile for a very long time. So he'd been there. He was still ventilated. He was still in the isolette. We still couldn't consistently hold him every day. It was really just a day-by-day basis. We were still having crises. We were still walking into the unit wondering what happened in the few hours that we weren't there. We were still walking into the unit, always peeking to where his bed was, because if we saw all the team members, the neonatologists, the NICU nurses surrounding him, we knew he was having a bad day. And if nobody was there and we saw them all at the nurses' station, we're like, okay, I think we're okay for now. So we're really in the weeds. We were in the thick of it. Still, nobody was even telling us that he would come home because it was that precarious still. And there was this wonderful nurse. We got to know everybody. We were there for so long. We got to know everybody. They were all wonderful. NICU nurses, I will say, we should do a whole episode on NICU nurses. NICU nurses are angels on earth. I am completely convinced of this. They're a very special kind of human. We love them so much. So there's one in particular. She had this really thick Irish accent, the kind where I knew she was speaking English, but I had to really concentrate to pick out just enough words to string together what I thought she was saying. Eventually, by the end of our NICU stay there, I understood her quite well, but at the beginning, it was quite a challenge. She was the nicest lady, though. She was so sweet. And one of those nurses who was not just nice and not just caring, but you could tell she was very powerful. She was a really good advocate for her patients and her patients' parents. And that she wasn't going to put up with any kind of bureaucratic BS, that she would stand up for us. She was one of those where you just knew, like, okay, if you're taking care of my child, I know you are going to protect us and you're going to do what's best for us. So we were about 6 weeks into the NICU stay and it was winter. So typically there was a lot of rain, but that day the sun was shining and they had these huge windows, like floor to ceiling windows, wall to wall, to help us as parents just feel like we're outside, to get some fresh sunlight, to really be able to look outside, to see the trees, to feel some sun on our skin when we're sitting there by the windows. It made such a difference. I feel like all NICUs need to have that. It was so good, especially on the sunny days. It was so good for our mood to be able to feel the sunlight, to see the sun, to see the outside world, and remind ourselves that there's more to life than just what's happening in this NICU. So we're 6 weeks in. The sun was shining that day. We're in the middle bay. My son's health was still hanging by a thread. We did not know what was going to happen. We did not know if he would still survive. And I was sitting by his bedside. He was sleeping. He was having one of those days where I couldn't really touch him very much. So we were kind of leaving him alone, except for the cares of, checking his temperature and changing his diaper and everything every 3 hours. Other than that, we're kind of leaving him alone that day. And this nurse with the Irish accent came by and she said, "You need to write a book." Now, keep in mind, I was 6 weeks postpartum after a very high-risk pregnancy. I had lost so much muscle mass that I still couldn't stand up from a chair without getting help to stand up because otherwise I would fall down. I just kind of looked at her and went, "What?" And she said, "You need to write a book. What you guys have been through so far," and she didn't know how it was going to play out, right? There was a very good chance that my son was not going to survive still. It was that precarious of a situation. She said, "You guys have been through so much. You need to write a book because you have a lot to share with the world." And I laughed. I flat out burst into laughter because I thought she was joking. I thought she was joking because I used to have a binder where I would take notes every single day about what was happening to my son with his healthcare, with his health, with his diagnoses, with the treatment that we were trying with him and all that. I was writing everything down, mostly because I knew myself. I don't have a very good memory unless I write things down. I was always that kind of person. Even in college, in lecture, even if they said, "We will have the notes posted online," I would still be sitting there writing word for word because if I don't write, it doesn't stay in my memory. That's just the kind of person I am. I can't just listen to something and it just sticks. And then I knew on top of that, as highly stressed and as highly anxious as I was in the NICU because I was worried about my son not surviving and what's going to happen to him, that was going to impact my memory even more. And I wanted to make sure that I understood it because if there's anything that I learned from my pregnancy, it's that even if we had the best medical team in the world, it's still my health, it's still my child, it's still my family. It's my job to be on top of it. And I was not going to hand that power over to anyone, no matter how amazing the NICU nurses and the neonatologists were. I knew I had to be involved. The only way to do that was to remember what they were saying. The only way to do that was to write it down. So I thought that's why she was saying write a book, because it was turning into a book. I still have that binder. It's packed. It's like a 1.5-inch 3-ring binder. And it's packed with so much paperwork from everything they gave in the hospital, lab reports and test results, and then all my notes from the 109 days that he was in there. 1 page per day, at least. Some days had multiple pages. Those were not the good days. So I laughed. I thought she was joking. And she just looked at me. She had this very dry sense of humor. She just looked at me. She goes, I'm not kidding. This is not a joke. You need to write a book. I said, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. Kind of let it go from there. I think she might have said something once more while he was in the NICU. But then, life went on. He got bigger and stronger and he was discharged from the NICU. Totally forgot about it. It was about almost 2 years after he was discharged from the NICU that I went back to the hospital. I typically go back every year, but almost 2 years before his homecoming day, our hospital hosted an event for World Prematurity Day, which happens in November of every year. So they were hosting, so they invited me and several other families that had been in the NICU and had really just spent a lot of time there and gotten to know the staff and wanted us there for this event. So I go there, we're taking the pictures, and the media photographer was there, and he's kind of getting us all situated in front of all the isolates in that middle bay with me and several other mothers and NICU nurses and a couple of neonatologists. And I ended up right next to this Irish nurse. And as we're smiling, the photographer is like, okay, come together, move a little to the right, and like trying to adjust all of us, right? We're all smiling. And in the middle of the smile, she goes, have you written your book yet? I'm like, we're trying to take a picture. I wanted to just look at her and be like, what are you talking about? Have I written my book yet? Obviously, but we're taking pictures, so I couldn't. And so I laughed again. And after the pictures were over, she turned to me and she goes, seriously, have you written your book yet? And I just laughed it off and went, no, I didn't write a book. I've kind of been busy taking care of my micro preemie for the last 2 years and trying to keep him from coming back to the hospital and all of that. And again, she said, you should write the book. And again, I thought she was crazy. I'm not an author. I don't write. I talk. That's why I have a podcast, because I talk. I like speaking. I like talking to people. I'm not an author. Authors are a different type of person, right? I'm not that kind of person. They're a really cool kind of person, I think. I'm not an author. No, I haven't written the book yet. Another year and a half goes by. And while writing the book was not on my radar, working with women with high-risk pregnancies was. And as soon as we were cleared to get off of lockdown, which is a whole other episode we could do, and my son was allowed to kind of be more present in the world, and we started talking about preschool for him after he turned 3.5, I started thinking about this business. How can I help women who are going through a high-risk pregnancy? Because I know there's a lot of help that's needed. I know that because I was that patient who needed the help. I also knew that there isn't enough of the right type of support available. And so that was where my attention went. And I started building my practice. And I started working with women who had preterm contractions, preeclampsia, gestational hypertension, PPROM, polyhydramnios, who are pregnant after recurrent pregnancy loss. So many different types of women who are pregnant after prematurity. And every single one was blown away by the power that was held in her body when I taught her how to use it. When I taught her that she had it and how to use it. Every single one. 100% of my clients would tell me, I had no idea that I could impact my body, that I could change my body this way. And the results were almost immediate. We're talking maybe a few days in, but for the most part, they're almost immediate. Contractions would slow. Blood pressure would come down. Sugar levels would even out. Every single time. Consistently. No matter what she was presenting with, no matter what she was coming with, it would happen every single time. And it got me thinking, if I could do it, and if they can do it, and we're not talking about guaranteeing making it to term. I didn't make it to term. I've had a couple of clients who have not made it to term, and we knew that when they started working with me. They're likely not going to make it to term. But they were able to surpass the expectations of their medical team. 100% of them. 100% of them. Some doctors would say, you're not going to make it past 32. That client went on to 38. Another client, doctor said, you need to prepare yourself for delivering at 28. She delivered at 37. Another client, this one, I won't forget any of them, but this one was one of my first. And her doctor said, you need to prepare yourself for losing your baby because she was in that periviable stage. She was around 23 weeks, which is in some hospitals not considered a viability until 24. Doctor said she's going to lose the baby. She made it to 26. 26 is a whole world of a difference from 23. I know it doesn't sound like that if you haven't experienced it personally. I can tell you as the mother of a 24-weeker, 26 weeks is a completely different story than 23. It happened to every single one of them. And I thought, if they can do it, if I can do it, if we can really harness the power of our body, then anybody can do it. Anyone can do it. How do I tell more people about this? And I grappled with that for so long. And in that process, this podcast was born. But it still felt like it wasn't enough. What else could I do? And slowly, as I started sharing that frustration and that curiosity with more and more people, the same message came back. You should write a book. Have you considered writing a book? What if you wrote a book? And every time I thought, yeah, okay, fine. Thanks for that. What else? What else you got? Because I'm not writing a book. I'm not an author. I'm not an author. I can't write a book. Who am I? Like, I can barely put out a blog post. That takes forever. I can't write a book. And it wasn't until the last quarter of 2017, and in the span of 36 hours, I had three people who I don't talk to on a regular basis. One was a journalist. One was a friend who I don't, not a very close friend, but we have a mutual friend in common who is a writer. And one was just some random business connection that I had made. None of them knew each other. None of them knew the history of my business very well in detail. I was telling them about what I was working on, the clients that I help, and my visions for the private practice and all of that. And all three of them in the span of 36 hours said, so when's your book coming out? It's not even, why don't you write a book? Have you thought about writing a book? It was an assumption. The book was already written and I was waiting to announce it. I hadn't started writing the book because I wasn't going to write a book because I'm not an author. And that really opened my eyes, though. 3 people who knew nothing about each other, who didn't even know my business very well, who didn't know my practice very well, who didn't really know me very well as a person, all made the assumption that I was writing a book in the span of 36 hours. I thought, okay, I don't necessarily believe in a larger force or a being or anything like that. Nothing in particular, at least. And I definitely don't believe in signs, but this really challenged that. I thought somebody somewhere is trying to get my attention. And that's how I actually changed my thinking and sat down and I wrote a book. I wrote the book because there is a tremendous power in our bodies. We have a lot more power than we are made to believe. I think one of the worst things that happen to women who are going through infertility, high-risk pregnancy, who are postpartum, who are trying to heal afterwards, and really this could be applied to any kind of health crisis like that. The worst thing that can happen is making a woman feel like she can't do anything. I think that's insane. I think that's cruel, and I think it's flat out wrong. When your child's life is hanging in the balance, the last thing that we need to be doing is making a woman feel helpless, making her feel like she has no control and like she has no power. That is the worst thing that we can be doing. And that is why I wrote the book, because if I could do it and my clients could do it, anybody can do it. This is not magic. It's not some special power, superpower thing that only certain people have. We all have it, and we are never taught to harness it. But the minute you learn it, your entire life changes. Your whole life changes because of how you experience your body, how you experience your health, and what you know that means for your future going forward, no matter what happens. And so the first thing I did when I started writing this book, I read a ton. I have bags and bags and bags of books because I ran out of space on my bookshelf. I have so many books that I read, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop consuming these books because of how much research there has been on this very topic. And the problem is, so many people in the medical field, in the research field, in the general community have pushed off these authors and these researchers and these scientists as alternative, holistic, fluffy. You don't know what you're talking about. Now look, every profession has people who don't know what they're talking about. I recognize that every single profession, including the medical field. Okay. But when there is research, when there is evidence-based research that proves that you can influence your health, even in times of a medical crisis, that needs to be shouted from the rooftops. And so today, I wanted to share with you a piece of that book, a book that is such a labor of love for me, because it's a message that I have lived. It's a message that I have shared with clients who have gone on to see the power of their bodies. And so it's a message I think every woman on this planet needs to have. I stand by it. I believe in it so strongly. And I want you to come on board and believe it too, that you have more power than you realize to protect your baby. You have more control over your health, even if you have pregnancy complications. So if you'll join me, I'm going to read you the introduction of Pregnancy Brain. When I was about 12 years old, my dad clipped out an article from a newspaper, put it on a refrigerator, and told my brother and me, this is why we need to be more positive in life. It was the story of a man who had suffered a massive heart attack. His doctors had given him a poor prognosis, but the man didn't accept the bleak future painted for him. Since he had nothing to lose, he decided to take matters into his own hands. You've surely heard the phrase, laughter is the best medicine. He took that old adage to heart and committed to laughing every single day, not just chuckling or giggling, but doing whatever it took to get those deep belly laughs. The news article shared that his serious heart condition improved without explanation by his medical team, and he was discharged from the hospital, something his physicians told him would likely not happen. I was shocked, curious, and mesmerized. What had happened to him? How had he beaten the awful prognosis the doctors were sure was his future? If he could do it, could others? Did laughter cure this man in the news story of his heart disease? No. Proponents of laughter therapy will be the first to tell you that laughter is not a cure-all solution. However, what scientists have found repeatedly is that interventions like laughter are so much more powerful than being simply mood-enhancing techniques. They create neurological, immunological, and cellular changes in your body that allow for healing to occur. For years, I've thought of that news article and the man who beat the odds. My dad had intended for this article to show us the importance of being more optimistic, happy people instead of the broody teens we were becoming. But what it did for me was far more profound than that. It planted a seed in my brain that over the years would sprout and grow into a vastly huge idea. One that I would get to test myself during several medical crises in my life. One that would challenge people's notions of what health really means. That idea is that we have the power to create our own medical miracles by influencing our health. This power comes from our ability to manage our physical, emotional, relational, and environmental stress effectively because our body systems are all interconnected and deepened, as well as influence each other for optimal physical health and functioning. It's an idea contrary to what the field of medicine tells us. To be honest, it took me a long time to speak out publicly about this because it challenges so many deeply held beliefs about what our bodies can and cannot do, what we can and cannot do, and what our doctors can and cannot do in the face of health complications, especially during pregnancy. Just as a plant blossoms with leaves, sometimes outgrowing the pot in which it was originally potted, so grew this idea until I couldn't ignore it anymore. Clearly, I wasn't the first to consider the possibility that lifestyle changes and stress management were important, critical to achieving optimal health and wellness. The mind-body connection has been addressed by the medical field, neuroscientists, and health advocates for nearly a century. So when I began my research into stress management and lifestyle medicine to improve pregnancy outcomes, imagine my surprise when I heard crickets. I only found a handful of articles in mainstream media sharing this message. It was as if the role of stress during pregnancy was an afterthought to medical professionals and women alike. There was a feeling that the impact of stress on pregnancy was being hidden behind a curtain that's best not to open. It's safe to say most of us have a vague understanding that stress is bad for health, but women do not regularly, if at all, receive information about the details of how it impacts health, specifically during pregnancy. Once I opened my private practice offering stress management health consultations for pregnant women, I was inundated with emails from women sharing their stories of stress during pregnancy. I received dozens upon dozens of emails from women recounting their stories of loss, convinced stress played a role. Emails from women who raised their concerns with their obstetricians about how anxiety was impacting their pregnancy or growing baby, only to be brushed off. Emails from women who had asked for referrals from mental health providers to not be seen for months due to long wait lists and insurance blocks. These were women desperate for answers to confirm what their gut was telling them and tools for how to prevent a similar experience in future pregnancies. This infuriated me. Why were women not receiving the support and information they need to understand how stress negatively impacts pregnancy and how effective stress management can create positive changes in pregnancy? There had to be literature out there showing a connection between stress, pregnancy complications, and preterm delivery. There also had to be research and literature out there showing the connection between effective stress management and positive pregnancy outcomes. If there's evidence that stage 4 cancer can go into remission, chronic illness can be cured, and heart disease can be reversed because of the impact of the mind-body connection, why can't we expect that effective stress management can improve the health of a high-risk pregnancy and reduce the risk of preterm delivery? My search deepened and became more fervent. I delved into the research. Somebody had to know about this. What I found shocked me and sent me down a rabbit hole that led me to a gold mine. People weren't just talking about it. There has been more than 70 years of research, literature, and science documenting the dramatic mind-body connection between stress and fertility, pregnancy, prenatal complications, and preterm delivery. The whole book is on that very topic. It's on that very topic because I want you to know this is not just in your head. Stress management is not something, oh, that would be nice to have. Maybe I should just try it. There is so much evidence on what it does to your body when you effectively manage stress. It actually changes your body down to a cellular level so profoundly that you can notice changes to your complications and your health almost immediately. That is what I want for every woman to know. And so that's how the book Pregnancy Brain came to be. The rest of the introduction goes into a little bit of the science and the biology of stress and pregnancy and fertility, mostly pregnancy. And then the rest of the chapters from there talk about the different sources of stress. We talk about anxiety, guilt, grief, trauma, surrendering, and how that's not the same as giving up. So many different aspects of the sources of stress and so many different aspects of how to overcome the effects of stress and how that can profoundly impact the health of your pregnancy. I do share a lot about my story because one of the things that I felt was really missing was feeling like somebody understood when I was going through it. Some of the thoughts that you have, some of the worries that you feel, some of the what ifs that are constantly going through your mind, they're not ones that make sense to other people. They don't really get it. And I wanted to show you through my experience that I see you. I've been there. You're not alone in the thoughts that you're feeling. And then I share a lot of my client stories to show you just how much can change for you when you tap into the power of your body during a high-risk pregnancy. And everything is backed by research and science. There are pages and pages and pages at the end of the book with citations to journal articles and books and textbooks that all chronicle and delve into the depths of science on how stress impacts pregnancy health and how stress management, effective stress management, can actually change the course of your pregnancy. It is truly a labor of love. And I really hope that if this message resonates with you, that you will check out that book because there's nothing else that's like it on the market. The goal is not to scare you with more information. I've written it so that it reads like my podcast. I've written it very conversationally, as if you and I are sitting together at your kitchen table, having some tea, and we're chatting about the reality of what you're going through and what you can do about it. My hope for you, my deepest intention for you is that you really feel how powerful you are, no matter how scary and difficult the situation is at this moment. I don't want you to ever forget that. Pregnancy Brain is available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon, and you can learn more about it at pregnancybrainbook.com. If you can't get it where you are, shoot us an email at info@parijatdeshpande.com and we'll figure it out and we'll get it to you somehow. I really, really want you to know you have more power than you realize. I believe that with my whole heart. That is the intention of the book. I didn't write it for me, like the Irish nurse had wanted. I didn't write the story as a memoir. I didn't write it to share just our story. I wrote it to share how much you can do, how much hope there is, how much is in your control, because I know that's not a message you're getting often enough. That's a message you need to be hearing every moment of every day as you're fighting for your baby's life. And I believe it with all my heart, and I really, really hope that you join me and believe it too. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you can head over to Apple Podcasts by iTunes and subscribe and leave a review so more women can hear about delivering miracles and can tune in every week to receive inspiration, motivation, advice, tools, and messages of hope about how to get through infertility, a high-risk pregnancy, prematurity, and healing afterwards. Also, like I said, Pregnancy Brain is available. It's here and it is on Kindle and on paperback on Amazon, and you can learn more about it and grab your copy at pregnancybrainbook.com. I really can't wait for you to check it out. And I'd love to stay in touch, so follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook, all at Parijat Desh, Parijatdesh. The introduction of Pregnancy Brain begins with a quote by Robert Schuller that says, "Impossible situations can become possible miracles." And that's exactly the message that I want you to walk away with when you listen to this podcast, when you read Pregnancy Brain. Because as hard as this is right now, as impossible as it feels to get to the next day, the next moment, miracles can happen for you too. I don't want you to ever doubt that, because you deserve it. You are worthy, and it is possible for you to experience. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.